Boom! We are live. Welcome. Oh, I've got to turn on the screen capture. Oh, I thought it would all be set up. Hang on a sec, let me do this. So, good to see everybody, and let me quickly get everything set up. Boom, boom. Air server, that is what I'm now using, so I can just hold this without having wires all over the place. I've got wires hooked up to the iPad, which means I can do Chaos later and all of that later on. You're listening to the sounds of Tokyo Digital Crew just before the show. And how are you all doing? Welcome to Tokyo Tonight. It's good to see you all. I'm Hiko Simon. I do this every week. I come and I talk about what's interesting me from the news, from my site, MyChan TV, from tech stuff, mostly about Japan stuff. Hope you're all very well. Hope you're enjoying the music, enjoying the sounds of the Tokyo Digital Crew, of which some of the members there in the comments, including Tai Nakamura, are of course members. Oh sweet, Tai, Folkheart, and you might be in Tokyo the same time this spring. Yes, yes. And seriously, yeah man, we've got to do something. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Anyway, great to see so many people. I hope you enjoyed the music coming in. Yasa, glad that you made it for the first time in a long time and that you were enjoying the lovely new chat interface, although it doesn't quite get all the characters quite as well there on the side there. Let's say hello to everybody first. I've got some updates, some news and general stuff, and then we'll get into the topics for the show. But first of all, Azumanga Dave. Dave Honda, great to see you. Bold Billis Boy, boom, boom, boom. We've got booms everywhere. Pyrotechnics. ASDF 12131, great to see you, boom, right there. We've also got the JVlog 07, I always say JVlog 07 because you've always got that salute thing, but I'll salute you back. We've got Yasa, we've got, for the first time in forever, indeed. James Kelly, good to see you, James Kelly. Who else? We've got Andrea Mobboy, who's got to go to sleep early. We've got Mogberry Pie, good to see you, how's it? Who else have we got here? We've got Bull Billis Boy, we've got Tai Nakamura, we've got Steve from Berkeley, we've got Quinn Ranked, we've got all the beautiful people. Tim, the Asian Ink, good to see you, sir. Who else have we got here? James Kelly, Steve from Berkeley, yes, there we go. I think we're pretty much caught up at the moment. Sergeant Bilko, I think, is in there somewhere. There's Sergeant Bilko, good to see you all, and good evening. So, update with MyChan TV. The update is that I've been looking at, I think I mentioned this last week, but I was looking at what I do as the next step, because at the moment I'm paying for the whole upkeep of the site myself, and it does work really well, but I was asking what people wanted like for the next cool thing, and a lot of people said, oh, they want a mobile app, and I went to go and check how long, how many hours we think and how much it would cost to develop the website into a mobile version, which I agree would be pretty cool. In fact, I'd really like a Fire TV or an Apple TV version of it. However, it's going to be quite a bit, and I'm already quite a bit in the hole, and it's costing a bit of overhead, so I want to figure out the easiest way to get it into a situation where I can get people kind of on a Patreon basis who like it, who want to support the site, and figure out how to promote it in a way that I can start, I still want the site to be free for most people, but I also want people who want to support the site to be able to support it and just help me keep it up. So, just to keep it running. So from that perspective, I've changed tack from the mobile app. I'm going back to the original plan, which is looking at creating like special MyChan TV accounts, which will be basically if you pay like a Patreon, I'll try to make it a small amount, but enough to keep, help me not lose money on the site and have to shut it down, just to keep it going. So I want to do that, and the idea of the new site will be it'll have, or basically the new login system, is that for people who support the site, what you'll do is, the site as it is right now will just stay as it is forever, and it works perfectly well. As you can see, you can binge watch, catch up on all your YouTube videos and so on with it. But I'm thinking of adding a few channels, or a few features to and basically every improvement and every new feature that we roll out. The idea is that obviously the people who are paying for the site are the people who are going to enable me to add new features. So I'm going to give a couple of new features. I'm looking at the moment at the basis of having the second tier of users on the site, where the first thing that I want to do is when I'm catching up, when I'm auto playing all of my subscriptions, it's really cool. You feel like you're catching up a lot when you're watching a lot of 2 or 3 minute videos, and then boom, you get like a 2-hour video, which you've got to go manually go and tap ahead. And I'd really like to be able to adjust the length of videos that pop up in your feed. So from that perspective, I think that'll be a nice one which will give you control. Do you want to watch long videos, short videos? If you only watch short videos, you can catch up a lot more videos in your subscriptions backlog or whatever. You can watch a lot more people. So I'm thinking of doing a feature like that as the first pro feature, and then build it out over time based on basically what the pro users say. Of course, free users as well, you know, and hopefully, you know, if that gets some momentum, and you know, hopefully, if I'm not, the idea is I don't want to. I just made this because I really want to make this. I think it's a really useful thing. If it starts covering its own costs, I want to feed it back into the idea of the Apple TV, the Fire TV apps, the mobile apps and stuff like that. But you know, obviously, for now I've got to get the site just rolling, and at the moment it's good, it's solid, it hasn't collapsed, it's working really well, and I really would appreciate it. It's free. So what I really want the most is people to use it and you know, appreciate it, spread the word a little bit about it. But you know, so please go check it out. But bear in mind, yeah, I do want to do this correctly. It's got the 5-minute timeout thing. There we go. So yeah, that's the update from my Chan TV. I'm still scoping this out, but hopefully we will start on having dedicated accounts. I'm trying to figure out the best way to sort out payment as well. I mean, you can do it with Patreon, but I want to obviously make it so that people who are paying get the benefit, get the account connection. So I'm thinking about the best way to pay as well as set up a subscription system for it. And I know I'm being told to use Stripe, which is like the most universal one, but I like the idea of Amazon Pay, partly because it's like used by everyone, and partly because I don't want the data. I don't want the responsibility of having all the users' payment information. I like the idea of having a trusted platform like that, which I do trust, to use that. So that's the other idea anyway. So I'm playing around with this. I want to see how much, or basically how little I can develop it for, because I've spent a lot on the site, and it looks great, but yeah, I'm obviously, I don't want to have to, you know, lose. I want to try to see if I can make a go of it running. So anyway, that's the idea for the site. I really value all of you guys having a look at it and giving me your feedback as you do. And bear in mind that the future updates are likely to go into that. So yeah, that's the update with my Chan TV. What else? Nothing much else. People in Vancouver, I think I mentioned this last week. I'm currently planning that my son, he said he wanted to go to Vancouver, Canada, and we've booked a hotel in Vancouver for like May next year. So I'm going to Canada. That'll be kind of cool. I've never been to Canada before, so if any of you are in Canada, I'm going to probably start wanting lists of things to do and whatnot. So yeah, there's all that good stuff, but other than that, not a lot going on at the moment, other than the news that I'm about to start covering. And Tim the Asian, thank you. I mean, you're one of my super users anyway, who's been really great throughout, but that's the idea. So yeah, let's get into the topics that we have for tonight. The first thing is Merry Christmas. It is not quite Halloween yet, but Starbucks is rolling out the new Christmas cake frappuccinos and gingerbread lattes. Basically, all the Christmas promotions are now starting before Halloween, which I suppose is the same everywhere, every year. I mean, why let the calendar stop you making money off a vacation that's 2 and a bit months away? But yeah, so all very good. I actually really liked, a few years ago in Tokyo, Starbucks had hot apple cider. I like apple cider. I like apples, and the hot apple cider they had was delicious. But they did this like, I'm counting the years. It was like 10 years ago, and they haven't repeated it, and it's really annoying. I want them to do that. So yeah, that's kind of good enough. Although the other thing is Christmas cake. I never really personally liked Christmas cake. I know Japanese when they do Christmas cake, they just think it's a cake that you eat at Christmas, and because they associate Christmas with dating, they think of it like a strawberry shortcake with cream, or some sort of delicious cake that you would give your date, not like a, you know, cannonball preserved heavy, you know, rum raisin cake like I associate with Christmas cake. I never really liked Christmas cake much as a kid, but there we go. Anyway, that is Starbucks is getting started. This is a really good article in The Atlantic, and it talks about this theme which goes over and over whenever America in particular decides to start beating up on Japan over trade. They talk about well, first of all, they say all the trade barriers to Japan, and you know, Japan points out, well, we don't have any tariffs, anyone can send cars here, and people say, well, it's not that, it's the other protections that Japan has. And it's a good point. It's worth reminding. So what does Japan do without trade barriers that American cars don't sell in Japan, apart from the fact that Japanese just often generally don't like, they're like German cars. They sell plenty of German cars in Japan, but people don't tend to like, you know, foreign cars or American cars anyway. You don't see them very much. A couple of problems. I mean, first of all, the obvious ones. The steering wheel is on the wrong side of the car, and most American car manufacturers do not make left-hand drive or actually right-hand drive cars. They're the steering wheel on the opposite side of the car. So Japanese who really like American cars will import them from America with the steering wheel on the wrong side of the car for the Japanese road. And it's kind of a status symbol to have that, but it's kind of it's really inconvenient as well. When you're going through highway toll stations, you have to lean through the passenger side to pay. So you get that. I mean, again, sometimes they have made a few attempts to specifically manufacture for the Japanese market and sell cars here. Other things are, of course, things like the car parking buildings. They require a certain wheelbase, and it means that there are cars, even with the German cars, for example, if you get the bigger Mercedes-Benzes or BMWs, I'm sure with pretty much any American car, they won't fit on the sort of racks, which are made for very specific chassis size specifications, which are basically equivalent to a small or mid-sized car. So it means this is why in Japan you only see really the mid-size Audis, because they just won't fit into the car parks most of the time. However, this article in The Atlantic goes through the other issues that Japanese car owners sort of have, even when they like American cars and want to buy them. Apart from for me, honestly, there aren't many American cars that I feel that drawn to, actually. I mean, Japan has really good cars. One thing that is that comes up here is the parts. If you need to get, and this happens with German cars as well, it takes a long time for them to get shipped if you have to put the car in the shop. I mean, this is true, of course, of any. The other thing is, of course, the American car makers themselves. The main issue is that Japanese are really demanding when it comes to customer service. I mean, they expect to have a really good network of places that provide free aftermarket service for the cars. American car makers don't provide aftermarket service typically for free, and certainly not to the extent that Japanese customers expect. So this means that they've only really come here in a half-hearted way with a small number of cars when they've done it, and yet they go back and complain. So it's sort of like, anyway, this article in The Atlantic is really good, and it goes through in a lot of detail what all the sort of factors are, and it's good to understand. Degens Konto, good to see you. You were surprised to see some very large Toyotas in Japan. Very large Toyotas, I wonder what those are. In terms of the chassis or the wheelbase, generally they still fit with the sort of standards, although I guess you do get, sometimes you'll see those American, made for America utility vehicles, which are enormous, like the Lincoln things. I've seen a couple of those near the Palace a couple of times. Of course, a Land Cruiser sometimes you'll see as well, which is really big in Australia and stuff like that, where you need actual solid, reliable four-wheel drive cars. They're amazing. By the way, just a total random thing, this isn't in the topics at all, but lately I've been watching videos on Facebook a lot. I've kind of gotten addicted, and it's noticed that I quite enjoy watching the Donut Media, all you need to know about certain types of cars, and they really do a lot of sort of classic Japanese like sports cars and stuff like that. The Evo, the Skyline, the RX-7. And when I grew up in New Zealand, it's weird. I've been in Japan for 20 years, Tokyo for 20 years, and I haven't owned a car the entire time, which is kind of baffling. I had a car when I was 15 years old. In New Zealand, you could drive at 15. I got my license on my birthday. I was driving to school from when I was 15. I think they've raised the driving age now, but back in my time, it was like 15. And you can't live in New Zealand without cars, and we basically have nothing but used Japanese imports for everything. Drive on the same side of the road, the cars are great. So everyone at school is like obsessed with magazines about the latest Japanese cars and stuff like that. So I grew up like a huge fan of all the cars that the series is about, and it's got like the whole history of each one of the cars. It's really, really, well, some people don't like it. I've posted that I liked it on Facebook, and some people don't like the fast cut, noisy kind of style, but I really enjoy it, actually, and I'd recommend it. DONUT, Donut Media cars. You should check them out. Actually, they're really, really good if you're into cars. Fox Morris, good to see you. So that is the Focus, which I think they tried selling here for a while. They sold a couple, but that's right. I think because they make those in Cologne, but that's right, they can sell them in the UK, so that's probably why they sent them to the Japan market. But then they sold 5,000 units in a year, and they decided it wasn't enough, and they're pulling out, for example, for Ford. And then they complain, and they get, and the American government starts freaking out, like, Japan's not playing fair, but they never really tried to sell here in the first place. That said, the Ford Focus actually isn't a bad car, and it's also based on the Mazda 3 platform, which is also a great car. But yes, the protectionist thing. Mr. Kordychek, good to see you. Welcome to the show. This is kind of good news. Well, of course, Japan has the most visa-free travel passport in the world, and often that's reciprocal. It means that if you're going to a country which allows Japanese in without the need for it to pre-apply for a visa, it's often mutual. However, for the remaining countries that do need to apply for a visa before you can travel to Japan, China is one of those. Japan's implementing an electronic visa system, which means that rather than going to the embassy and submitting paperwork, which is what I have to do whenever I had to travel to China, and submitting paperwork and going through an in-person process, you will be able to, if you're from a country which requires going to the embassy to get a visa to come to Japan from 2020, Japan's going to start an electronic visa system, starting with China, where you'll be able to apply for a visa online. And not have to go to the embassy, so it's going to be a lot easier, a lot more convenient for coming to Japan, so that's quite good news. Amongst all the other things that they're making the airport's actually a lot more convenient as well. So yes, paperwork sucks indeed, so they're getting rid of that. That's a good thing. Yeah, I've added Timeout, in fact it's Timeout Tokyo, it's just timeout.com lately to my sort of most focused on Twitter accounts. They've got a lot of really good information on stuff that's going on in Japan and Tokyo. TeamLab, I mentioned them before. They've got the crazy digital art museum in Tokyo, where actually there's but a bunch of people have gone over there for like photo shoots, and they're posting that on Facebook, and they always look really, really amazing. TeamLab is amazing. The guy who founded it, and the name escapes me at the moment, but yeah, I've actually interviewed him back in the a long time ago personally, just about a music site that he helped to run. But yeah, he's basically the digital art, but the digital art that apply technology like in really interesting ways. And they're going to be doing a lot of stuff around the Olympics as well. There's going to be a lot of venues around Tokyo. For example, one idea that I've heard that they're looking at setting up will be in Shibuya, where they're going to show a holographic version of the 100 meters in Shibuya, for example, if they get this going up right, where you'll be able to stand there and actually stand on, like you're standing on the track with the athletes, and actually watch them run like in public spaces and stuff like that. Like it's like you're in the middle of it with their all holograms and stuff. They just crazy cool stuff, and they're always sort of expanding. I mean, it's great for kids, but frankly it's really great for adults. So if you ever get a chance anywhere in Japan, but especially in Tokyo, to go and check out any TeamLab exhibition, and they're all over the place now, and they're all digital based, interactive projections, holograms, stuff like that. They're super cool, and really best in the world, so you should go and check that out. I think that's pretty good. TeamLab, LSD Lab, more like it. Well, yes, and it's free and it's legal, so go for it. This was interesting. I saw this yesterday on gaijinpot.com blog. I don't know, I mean, everyone claims to be the first. Osaka's first social apartment is here. It's basically sounds a lot like a kind of a fancy youth hostel, where basically the idea is, in fact, it reminds me of my dorm at university. Again, a lot fancier, but it's the same idea that you've got your own private space, like a little apartment where you've got your own private space, but there's a lot of public spaces. Apparently Takatsuki is directly in between Osaka and Kyoto, which strikes me as probably being slightly inconvenient, actually probably like 40 minutes from both or something like that, but it's in an okay location. But the idea is it's focused on getting residents there to interact, so it's got like big TV and movie viewing rooms, table tennis, sort of bars and so on. So basically it's like the idea of being in a shared house, but where you have proper private spaces as well as shared spaces. It's a pretty cool idea, especially if you are backpacking or traveling, or you want to be in Japan for a few months and you want to meet lots of people, which was what I did when I was backpacking, when I was actually at university still. So it actually strikes me as a pretty good idea, and it looks pretty flash. Yeah, Bold Berlitz, boy, you've got a larder. That's pretty impressive, actually. We had larders in New Zealand. I remember my friend had a larder, and I remember being in the back, and when we were driving I looked down and I noticed that you could see the road, which made me think, oh god, the door isn't shut properly. So I opened the door and closed it again, and then I realized, no, you could see the road even with the door closed properly. I guess that was a feature, but yeah, they were solid cars. I mean, I think they were converted T-62 Russian tanks. So yeah, this is kind of interesting. This has gotten a few discussions. A lot of schools are actually starting to teach the numbering system in Japanese without following the Western system of grouping zeros by 3, and they're grouping them by 4 when they teach it to kids. This makes complete sense in Japanese. Basically man, oku, all the big sort of units. If Japanese, had numbers like us and they had commas, they would absolutely make commas every 4 digits, not every 3. It's the way that the language works. However, apparently, and it is super confusing always trying to have to convert numbers which are put together linguistically on a sort of base 4 digits into base 3 digits, organizing them like that. It's kind of a happy coincidence in a way that because it's 100 yen to the dollar that you end up having 10,000 yen equals $100 roughly. But apparently some schools are starting to adopt textbooks that actually promote the teaching of numbers themselves different. So for example, where we would say 1,000, 1 million, Japanese always say for 1 million they say 100 man, which is 100 man, 1 million. It kind of makes more sense as a language, but obviously it makes it pretty rough, and even Japanese commenters did point out Japan's the only country in the world, well, maybe there are other countries, I'm not aware of any other countries, but as far as I know, it's the only country in the world which groups numbers in this way. So it may help the kids in the short term get to grips with the Japanese numbers, but in the long term, it's going to make it even more confusing when they go out in the world. So it doesn't strike people as a good idea. Although I must say, if you're learning Japanese, yeah, it's maybe it's helpful for learning. I do find it took me seriously like 2 years before I got comfortable with Japanese numbers, especially when you talk about it like in engineering, and when you talk about it with financials. It's super confusing, and people make these digit-based mistakes all the time, and it's not a good thing, but it kind of is what it is. Fox Morris, so do I see price tags? Well, no, I don't. So the idea is that this is something that schools are starting to roll out to make the numbers easier for kids to understand. You don't see this ever in public, although of course if they are using Japanese characters, like for example, it's totally normal that you would see, instead of a comment, they'll put like the man symbol. So for example, it is totally normal for apartment hunting. For example, if there's an apartment worth 40,000 yen a month, they'll say 4 man, or 4.4 man, or something like that. In fact, it's actually totally normal that you'd see, for a car, for example, for a used car, you'll see 83.2 man, which is actually 832,000. But yeah, so you see, you don't see it with the comma like that, but you do see it with the Japanese characters being minimized and sort of put in there and used like that all the time. And yeah, it takes some adaptation, but that's right. So you'll see, for example, 1.5 man written like ASDF 12131 just did. And again, you just kind of, it's a bit like getting used to Fahrenheit and Celsius. I guess you just have to get used to it. Sergeant Buko's being cheeky and confusing with users that have a lot of digits in their name. Jelly Duck 100, good to see you, Jelly Duck 100. Welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy. Does India do groupings of 2 digits? Well, whatever India is doing, I think we should all copy, because India, as far as I'm aware, I mean, we always look up to Chinese and Japanese as being like better at math than Western countries' education systems, but Japanese look up to Indians as having the best math systems. In fact, there's an Indian school in Minami Sunamachi in eastern central Tokyo, which is where a lot of the brightest IT engineers all sort of aggregate and live with their families. And the school that they have, which teaches Indian math syllabus, there are Japanese who put their kids into that school because they consider it's got a math syllabus more advanced than the Japanese one. If they use 2 digits, then I think we should all copy them, if you ask me. So yeah. Oh my god, Fahrenheit, why? Well, that's right. Well, as well, I mean, England is like a practical joke that England played. They got it. They colonized America with it. Then they changed it, and America just didn't change. So there you go. Anyway, we are 23 minutes in, and I've only covered 2 of the topics. So let's speed it up. Although I don't have a lot of topics tonight, so I might have some time for the call at the end of the night. But we'll see how we go. You Darvish. So this is a little bit in reverse order. I might come back to this one. There's a story about a Japanese free journalist, basically a internet-based journalist, a sort of freelance journalist who likes going to war zones. As you often hear, some journalists do. War journalists will go and do. They'll go and get stories, take photos, and make a living off selling those stories. The downside of being a journalist, freelance journalist who goes into war zones, is it does mean that you face a risk of getting kidnapped, and apparently this happened the second time to a particular Japanese journalist who, after being held hostage for a number of years in Iraq, and was the Japanese government paid a huge ransom to get him out. The same journalist then went to Syria and was abducted, and the Japanese government had to pay a huge sum of money to get them out. And Japanese society is not kind to people who do that, who put themselves in harm's way like that. Particularly in the case of Syria. The Japanese government issued a warning: all Japanese citizens do not go to Syria, please. And there were people when these hostages were first released from Iraq, particularly they were NGO workers and journalists who were in that situation. A lot of right-wing and conservative sort of Japanese society is this whole thing about, you're creating trouble for the rest of us by going and, on your own thrill-seeking adventure, you get yourself into trouble and it ends up costing all of us worry and money. So, we want to see you say sorry for going there. There's kind of an excuse to go and beat up on these people for not exercising proper self-responsibility. Jiko sekinin is the word that they use. It's like a buzzword in Japanese culture, particularly after the Iraq thing. So after all these people got so heavily criticized for, taking advantage of taxes and the government or whatever by being personally irresponsible, and by getting bailed out by the government, this guy went over again in spite of Japanese warnings, telling everyone not to go, and he was abducted again. And now that he's been released, frankly, a lot of cases, these hostages that get released, people say, oh, they were over there doing aid work, they're really lovely people, this was a terrible thing, isn't it great that they're back? But not in Japan. In Japan it's like, this irresponsible person went over when they should have known better, and of course all this trouble for everybody. And the Japanese government, they should have to pay back the Japanese government and the taxpayer, because they need to take personal responsibility for their actions. Grain of truth to it, but it's kind of harsh. Mr. Korichev, New Zealand people go to Syria? No, I'm talking about Japanese people. Probably New Zealand. I'm sure there are New Zealanders in Syria as well. Did I say us? I guess I've lived in Japan too long that I say it that way. In any case, while the internet basically started, where most countries, they treat these released hostages like heroes, this guy came back and he's kind of getting beaten up on by the internet. And Yu Darvish, legendary baseball player currently in the US, he went on online and just kind of reminded everybody, the whole Jiko Sekinin discussion going on. He said, look, I know a lot of people are beating up on this guy, but let's just remember, safety is sort of, isn't it good that he's safe, and let's not beat up on the guy. Pretty much. In fact, is this what he said? That's the guy himself. Also, the guy himself was totally, when they said, don't you feel guilty about going back again and getting abducted again? And the guy's like, no, screw you guys, it's my job. Which made everybody feel more self-entitled to beat up on him again. So basically, Yu Darvish, classy guy, said, I'll read it in English, his tweet there is above there in Japanese, but it's basically, a life was saved. So basically I think it's great. There's a lot of talk about Jiko Sekinin everywhere, but even when you complain, the sense of Jiko Sekinin comes from your own ability to do anything about it. Everybody lives and struggles with the inability to do one thing or another. We should just try to help each other out. I like all the people saying that if you go to a dangerous place and you get captured, you get what you asked for. To read up on what happened in Rwanda, for example, then you can understand what happens when no one goes to help. The movie Shooting Dogs Beyond the Gates makes it easy to understand. Be careful because it's very graphically violent. So he even puts a PG warning on it and says, it's good that these people are being conscientious about going to help. It's a wordy tweet, but it's in Japanese, so you can actually say a lot more in a tweet in Japanese, which Twitter thinks is cheating. They think that Japanese is cheating, so they didn't give Japanese the extra characters when they extended the extra characters for English, which is kind of racist and stupid, but it's Twitter, so what can you do? I mean, it's kind of natural in that sense. But yeah, classy guy, good stuff. Konnichiwa, so that's right, I see Jelly Duck still up there, further up in the comments there. Good evening to you. Who else we got in the comments who's joined since we started? Fluffy Fuzzbox, yo, indeed, yo, good to see you. And yes, Fox Morris asked the question, did I see the news that people pushed a car on the side in Shibuya last night during the Halloween party? I did see that, and I don't have that in here. Yeah, so basically, when I got to Japan a long time ago, barefoot walking through the snow, there was no Halloween. In the 90s, Halloween just wasn't really a thing, and it kind of was starting to pick up. It was more of a gaijin party thing in the late 90s, and it kind of got picked up that this was like a fun thing to do, and it was a fun excuse to put costumes on. Everyone kind of got it wrong, just like they get Christmas wrong and it's a big date night. Halloween became like a sexy costume party night. Not that anyone really complained or felt like they need to point out that that was incorrect. They would just go with it. It's their own interpretation, it's okay. But yeah, it became this kind of bigger and bigger thing, to the point now where it's become this big like annual cosplay party thing. And it's the two aspects to it. One, it's arguably bigger than Christmas now in Japan. People love Halloween. And two, particularly in Shibuya, and Shibuya is sort of the district where all the just turned 20s sort of hang out. It's become the focus of these, a bit like after the Soccer World Cup, when people go there and you get all these people, they're excited, they've just learned how to drink, they don't exactly know how to express themselves very well, so they go out in Shibuya and they just like hang off poles and stuff like that. Now, I think it's wonderful. In the same situation in New Zealand or in Europe, people would be smashing shop windows and setting, police cars on fire. In Japan, honestly, they just jump up and down and get very excited, and everyone gets very uncomfortable. And there are signs everywhere: please don't drink on your way to the parties in Shibuya. Please don't wear your costumes until you get there because it disturbs other people. All this sort of stuff. But basically, these are just pretty well-behaved kids, frankly, that just really don't know how to have a very good time or express themselves. So yeah, they get to Shibuya and they're jumping up and down. They don't really know what to do. And last night, and all the drunken revelry and trying to outdo each year or whatever, the police kind of like, kids, please don't act too crazy. Please don't climb up on the poles. Please get down from there. It's dangerous. This kind of thing. Yeah, the kids last night went out and they tipped over a parked car, which. Again, I mean, hell, when I was at university in New Zealand, we had like a 6:30 a.m. Champagne breakfast, 400 students, and we picked up cars and carried them across the traffic lights. We didn't tip them over. I thought we were being quite nice, but we were very drunk, and it did result in us being surrounded by riot police. The point being, I think misbehavior by Japanese is completely outrageous, and especially the people outside of Tokyo going, oh my god, Tokyo's a war zone based on this. No, it's basically a bunch of confused kids really being unsure how to really express themselves. But I think it's kind of cute. It's kind of a good thing. I'm fine with it all. So yeah, it's there was the usual stuff. Rubbish left. Oh my god, there's rubbish. And there was all these stories about all these irresponsible young people drinking, wearing costumes on the train, and leaving rubbish. And yes, the one car getting tipped over, I also agree. Well, of course, terrible. And of course, they shouldn't have done it. Of course, they're stupid. Just like climbing and hanging off poles and, all the other stupid stuff that young people do when they're drunk. But at the same time, I'd rather be dealing with Japanese drunk and out-of-control teenagers than I would in my own country or pretty much any other country in the world. So yes, but that stuff did happen, and I hope they get slapped around for it. So there you go. It is kind of cute, honestly. Well, Quinn Racket, indeed, the car owner. Well, it was a K car, by the way. The photos, a yellow number plate. So the car wasn't worth more than $10,000. I mean, that's right. It would suck if it's your car. No question, but the point is that compared to all the other stuff that I could imagine the same situation transposed anywhere else in the world, I think it still is pretty light. And again, I totally think that if put the kids in a paddy wagon who did it, I mean, again, that's totally what would happen. These kids would get arrested in any country, and they should get arrested in Japan. I hope that's what they do. Indeed, UK or Australian drugs. But I still think, again, I certainly wouldn't park my car anywhere near Shibuya, just like I wouldn't park my car near anywhere where there were going to be 200,000 drunk young people. Would you park your car? I mean, seriously, your car just getting tipped on its side, you've got off pretty well, I'd say, in most countries. You're lucky you wouldn't get set on fire. So yes, unacceptable, totally unacceptable by Japan standards, but I think in the big picture, I'm still okay with it. What else we got here? Logitech. So I don't actually use Logitech. I use a Microsoft camera, and it does the job pretty well. But they're getting into again, maybe a little bit late to realizing that they are the camera of choice for most streamers and so on. And so they're adding new software features to basically allow you to do more stuff, like, for example, setting up virtual cameras to capture your screen and live, within the software that governs the webcam at the same time. So basically getting a little bit more work, is the word, I guess. They're getting a little bit more work to the idea that they actually should be useful in the go-to camera for live streamers, which they are, but without having all the trouble of getting like virtual screen captures and stuff like that. That they're actually making their own cameras and software more streamer and vlogger friendly, which is a good thing, and it would make me consider making it my next camera, although right now it's good enough. By the way, remember, if you want to put a comment to get my attention, put the @ Hiko Simon so that I can see it. Like, for example, I see that Sergeant Bilko made a comment there saying barefoot in the snow is because I'm actually a hobbit. Yeah, thank you for that. So actually, and remember, I left the country, like Lord of the Rings came after I left the country, and it's kind of funny because a lot of the places where they made that movie I grew up, although I'm not actually a hobbit, so I know the whole hobbit thing. It was after my time when I left, and when I heard that the New Zealand government was like making such a big deal about making the movie there, that they actually set up a ministry of Lord of the Rings and a minister of Lord of the Rings, which was like, oh, please stop it, you're embarrassing me, home country. But yes, they did that sort of thing. And no, I'm not a hobbit, although, you know, I was very, very poor. So there you go. And I did actually live in towns in the mountains with snow with only 2 TV channels. Yeah, there were seriously only 2 TV channels, and the reception wasn't very good either. But there we go. Beaujolais Nouveau, it's back. So the first charter flight filled with Beaujolais Nouveau wine just arrived in Tokyo the other day to kick off the new Beaujolais Nouveau season in Japan. For some reason, so yes, I used to have a friend who was a French wine importer. I used to play rugby for a French rugby team, and one of the guys who I knew through that was a wine importer, and I would sort of say, well, you know, how do you find the taste and demand of Japanese people? And he was just like, oh, you just put grape juice and methylated spirits and they'll buy it. I mean, he was like a stereotypical, you know, condescending French waiter. He was basically, and he was selling, you know, he was making good money selling wine to Japanese, but he pointed out they appeared to have no idea of the value of what they were drinking. And this is the proof. Beaujolais Nouveau wine is like, honestly, it's like radiator fluid. It's horrible. It is the first grapes of each season crushed and made into this cheap, horrible wine that, seriously, I would only consider drinkable if you mixed it with lemonade. That's what they do in Eastern Europe, but that's because they actually do put radiator fluid into the wine in those countries to make it sweeter. In France, they don't do that, but honestly, they probably should, because it just tastes like crap. But the thing is, again, a bit like Halloween, Japanese love the idea of these annual festivals, you know, that go around the seasons or whatever, the first wine of the year. And when they heard that the French had this thing, it's like, oh my god, we have to get the first wine of the year. And the French are like, oh, you'll take this off our hands? Great, thank you. Please pay us lots of money for it. So it's totally a win-win. I mean, from the Japanese perspective, they are capturing the market of the first wine of the season from France, and they're flying it in on charter flights to, you know, have all these parties everywhere, people bathing in it, people doing all this sort of stupid stuff with it. And the French, you know, I mean, this is probably the best deal they've had with Japan since Japan agreed to take their nuclear waste shipments for reprocessing. I mean, they get to send now the nuclear waste and the Beaujolais Nouveau. The Japanese pay to take it. So, you know, it's a win-win from that perspective. It's horrible stuff, and yet it's been going for like 15 years now, and they're still chartering flights for it. So yeah, if you're French, it means that there are lots of French parties around Tokyo. The baguettes are not bad. The cheese that they serve with it isn't bad, but the wine is just horrible. So yeah, hey Lauren, good to see you. So yes, Whiskey Nouveau. Did someone just say the Sergeant Boca? Next week, Whiskey Nouveau. Indeed. Seriously, the Scottish people, try this. Try Whiskey Nouveau. Hey, try Haggis Nouveau. Seriously, somebody will take it. Okay, this is the biggest story probably of the week, or at least in terms of my Twitter. I tweeted this. I made a slight subliminal miss when I tweeted this, that Michaela correctly called me out on, but the story is this. Tokyo has a number of big parks. The big famous one is, of course, Yoyogi Park. It's a big free park that people go. People go there, play hacky sack. You see crowds of people there. There's so many people there. The grass is basically constantly dying. It's a little bit, you know, overrun with people and whatever. And there's the classy park in Tokyo, and the classy park is the classy park is actually the Shinjuku Gyoen. It's beside Shinjuku Station, and it's bigger than Yoyogi Park. It's grassier and greener. You can actually, it's like running around in New Zealand. The grass is beautiful, the gardens are beautiful. It's this wonderful park. I used to go there all the time. I haven't been there for a while recently. And one thing about the park that I must admit I've always noticed there is that there are always lots of foreigners there. And I always thought that was a little bit strange, because you have to pay 200 yen, about $1.60 to get in. And I know a lot of foreigners that just resent the idea, in principle, of ever paying $1.60 to get into a park, but it does have a really good effect with Japanese. But it does filter the crowds. You know, if you want a free park, just go to Harajuku, to Yoyogi, 2 stops away. You've got Yoyogi Park. But if you want to go and enjoy a classy park with classy people, you go to Shinjuku Gyoen, and of course that's where I would go. And it's $1.60, and I could go and play soccer with my kid or whatever. It was good. So, you know, I would do that all the time. It turns out, however, that the staff there, they have a kind of a gate system, a bit like a train station, but it's very wide, it's very sort of disabled friendly. There's always the staff of the park, and generally people like retired people doing it for extra sort of income. And it turns out that there was one member of staff, apparently, who over many years, the park gets a lot of people, apparently unable to speak I said English in my tweet, and it wasn't English, it was foreign languages, but all foreign languages, was basically 75 years old and terrified of speaking foreign languages, was unable to explain to foreigners that they have to pay to get in. And so when foreigners would come up and try to get in and they're confused with the system at the gate, he would just say, oh, it's okay, you can go in, just go in. And apparently he let in 200 yen a person. He let in 125,000 people over the period of a couple of years. So I kind of pointed out, just, you know, the park, unable to explain that they have to pay $2 in English, resulted in the park losing $250,000 in gate takings, letting in foreigners for free. It's kind of a joke I always like to point out about Japanese people. It's one thing to be racist, but, you know, if you're going to be, you know, racist, at least have the self-respect to put yourselves at the top of the tree, not below all the foreigners. So many Japanese people have these complexes. They feel all inadequate, that, you know, oh, I can't speak foreign languages, or please go ahead, sir. It's like, you know, it's kind of like self-racism, that they just feel completely inadequate, so they just let these people go in for free. It is a very Japanese. I mean, this is totally realistic. I can imagine this happening. And this is the old story, like when police pull foreigners over for speeding or whatever, and when they find out it's a foreigner, it's like, oh my god, I don't speak English, this is going to be such a hassle. And again, a lot of foreigners would say, hey, just pretend not to speak Japanese, they'll let you go. And unfortunately, it never happened to me, and I'd never pull a trick like that myself, but I've heard a lot of people who have done it, and yeah, you get away with it. It's the old gaijin smash. But yeah, this is one thing about Japan. Please, now that I've told you that this happens, don't take advantage of it. But that said, poor guy, this guy, overwhelmed. And actually, it was pointed out to me, I said English because he didn't speak English. He let all these people in. However, he did. There are probably more Chinese and Korean tourists that go there, so it's actually Gaikokugo, foreign languages, not just English. But it's kind of funny that this man who was kind of stuck there for a few years, unable to admit that he can speak foreign languages, and letting people in, maybe explains why there were so many foreigners in the park and not so many Japanese. But basically, for over many years, he allowed hundreds of thousands of people to go in for free. That's it. It's 200 yen. It's $1.80. I mean, who cares? But there you go. So that was kind of funny, and it got lots of retweets. Hiroko Tobuchi of the New York Times retweeted me. Thank you very much. And it got lots of reactions, including "I don't believe it" and all that sort of stuff. But there you go. On immigration into Japan, Japanese Brazilians snub Tokyo's diaspora residency program. So as you guys all know, Japan's got this huge worker shortage. In fact, I think I've got a story coming up that says that now the predicted number is that there's going to be a shortage of 6.5 million workers by 2030 in Japan that they need to urgently replace with immigrants. So, you know, Japan's desperate for workers at the moment. However, Japan first experimented with allowing immigration really in the late 80s and early 90s, and they had this idea back then, when there really were very few foreigners in Japan, that basically kind of straight up xenophobic thinking. They thought that you know, just allowing foreigners to come in is going to allow all the sort of crime that we imagine America and Europe have problems with. So rather than just allowing any foreigners to come in, the best way we can maintain social order is if we allow foreigners in, we give priority to people with Japanese ancestry who will, you know, intuitively fit in Japan right away and appreciate the culture. So the result of allowing people with Japanese ancestry to come and get work visas in Japan was the largest diaspora communities, America, Peru, and Brazil. Basically, many of these Japanese people of Japanese heritage came flooding into Japan, particularly from Brazil. Apart from the fact that they have a very large Japanese community in Brazil, Obviously in America they're pretty well off, but in Brazil, the economic difference meant, particularly during the bubble, it was a great opportunity for a lot of Brazilians to come to Japan and do well for themselves. What the Japanese weren't really anticipating when they allowed this was the fact that, well, two things perhaps. One, I love Brazil, and I love Brazil because of this. One, the Japanese who went to Brazil became pretty Brazilian. Like, the culture there is multicultural. I mean, I've talked with a lot of Brazilians about the complexity of racial politics and identity in Brazil, but for intents and purposes, Brazil is a very multiracial, very multicultural country with a very strong independent identity and culture, which is very different to Japanese culture. So although these people were racially Nikkei Japanese, they were also culturally very Brazilian, and Brazilian culture and Japanese culture are very, very different. It wasn't the intuitive just based on blood and DNA. It wasn't that didn't compensate for the cultural difference was the first thing. The second thing is that in Brazil, maybe more so to my observation than in America or Britain or New Zealand, it's one thing to say that we're multicultural, but in America or Britain or whatever, but particularly what I see in America is you don't get much racial mixing. To put it bluntly, you have even now in the media, like it's like when they have quotas for races, it's like you have to fit cleanly in one of the boxes. You have to be clearly black or clearly Hispanic or clearly whatever the hell that is. Because of course you can be black and Hispanic at the same time, so I don't know what they're looking for exactly for that, but Hispanic or Asian or white or whatever, they don't allow for these gray zones of being like part black, part white, part Asian, which is totally, there are a lot of people like that in Brazil. So you have these people of Japanese heritage, but they're actually quite often, as Brazilians seem to do, they get along with each other. They have kids and they have really diverse backgrounds, and they bring their spouses and stuff over. So actually there are a lot of, people getting in this diaspora program that were probably not the image that the Japanese government had. Also, of course, during the 90s, the bubble collapsed, and there was a lot of restructuring of factories in country towns in Japan, which had a lot of Brazilian factory workers. So they figured out the easiest way, because the Japanese law makes it so difficult to fire people. They decided to take the easy route and basically get rid of the foreigners first, who were generally on contracts, and these towns started paying Brazilians to go back to Japan. They treated them terribly, and they cleaned out these country towns that were full of Brazilian factory workers. So basically they invited these people, and when there was a struggle for them to fit in, they did nothing to help them, and then they basically paid them and kind of pushed them out to go and leave. When the economy turned bad, now all of a sudden Japan needs workers again, and they're saying, hey, Brazilian people, come back, we'll give you a diaspora visa again. And the Brazilians aren't taking it anymore, because they got treated like crap. And honestly speaking, I don't think it was it was partly due to ignorance on the part. Just Japanese had no idea how to run an immigration program. They had no idea how to make sure that there was integration for families. They assumed if they were Nikkei that they would just integrate. They didn't give them language lessons. The kids often ended up not going to school. There were social problems based on the lack of integration of the communities and so on like that, which the government just totally did nothing to anticipate or remedy when they came out. So it was really an example of like how not to run an immigration program. They just assumed that Japanese heritage would mean everything would look after itself, which of course isn't the case with Nikkei any more than it is the case of Caucasians or Asians or Vietnamese or Indians or whatever. So they're kind of learning at this, but the fact is the Brazilians got treated like crap. I went to Oizumi. I mean, I used to speak a little bit. Well, I speak Spanish, and I used to speak a little bit of Portuguese. I love Brazilian people. I love Brazilian culture. I've been hanging out in a few towns up there and had a great time. But those towns, those people got really badly treated. So yeah, hopefully the Japanese government starts to get a clue about this, because they need immigrants back, and these are supposedly the immigrants that they think that they want. But they should actually start listening for a change on that. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. Down the bottom, right now, in anticipation of trying to need to fill this dramatic need, and every sector of the economy is saying we desperately need workers, or else we're going to have to shut down. So all of these, basically the whole Keidan and the whole economic councils are all calling the government, please open the floodgates and let us start now recruiting foreigners from overseas to come to Japan and work to keep our businesses and to keep paying taxes and to fund the elderly and all that sort of stuff. Please let us get foreigners now. It's become kind of a crisis in Japan. So Abe's cabinet, and Abe, remember, a nationalist who himself, said he didn't believe that Japan needed immigration to fix its problems. set up a proposal for a dramatic loosening up of immigration laws. And apparently now that's going through the internal party deliberation. A lot of people within the LDP, which is traditionally the conservative and slightly xenophobic governing party that Abe himself is from, are saying, yeah, you know what, the elderly people in our country towns that pay for us, you know, that elect us, they're not going to be comfortable with all these foreigners, so we're not sure we can go this far with this. It's kind of funny, like, in a way, it was, I figured it always was going to do really well, because the most conservative politician in Japan was sponsoring it. If this was being done by the Democrats, it would be probably a lot uglier. It'd be really easy for the conservative opposition to crap all over. But the fact that the really conservative government is the one that's bringing this, I figured, oh, well, okay, well, apart from the fact that Abe's got a lot of criticism for supposedly being, you know, kind of xenophobic, he's the one who recognizes the need. So I thought it was going to sail through, but it turns out that the LDP itself is possibly too racist to be comfortable with this. That said, again, compared to immigration debates in every other country, I think Japan's been very utilitarian about it. Obviously the numbers as well are very, very low in Japan. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how that goes and how it goes through his own party. What I mentioned just before, by the way, about just social issues happening with Japan at the moment, including the difficulty of laying people off. This is something that you'll often see with Japanese companies, although it's rare to see it on this scale. This is a big Japanese IT company. So the deal, as I understand, I'm not a Japanese employment lawyer or employment law expert, but my understanding of the law is this. Basically, you can't fire people in Japan. I mean, it's next to impossible. You have to pay them a huge compensation package or risk having to, you know, getting dragged over the coals by the employment tribunal in Japan. They've made it easier now with the contract employment system, but if you're a lifetime employee, you can't fire people. I mean, even if they do stuff that would get you fired, you can't fire them in Japan. They're really well protected by Japanese labor laws, which is a legacy of the kind of brief socialist period that Japan had under MacArthur right after World War II, kind of a backlash against the fascist government of World War II, that they implemented all of these worker protection laws that still remain in force in Japan. They're the backbone of lifetime employment in Japan, and it means that you cannot get fired. And this is why the old joke is, you know, for the old thing about the window desk, or that employee, you know, the punishment of that worker for disgracing the company is that he will have to sit at a window desk for the rest of his days. You remember that from Rising Sun, horrible movie, but you know, this whole sort of stereotype, it's kind of true. And I've seen people like this as well. Your punishment for like being like the most horrible person or a complete failure at the company is that they'll give you a steady salary, increasing over time, and no work responsibility, which for a lot of people is actually a perfectly good choice. When Japanese companies want to move people out and they can't fire them, you'd think, well, just put them in some horrible, put them in the boiler room or demote them or do something like that. But this is the other thing. Even demoting them, some companies tried that, and you can't just, you know, make them floor sweepers or whatever, you know, and cut their salary in half. You can't do that either. So you have to basically give them a role of equal seniority and responsibility. If you want to push them out, basically. So what companies are forced to do is they're forced to reassign, and it's really common in Japanese companies to rotate people around within different departments in the companies. So they basically, this company, in this case Fujitsu, has just taken 5,000 of its back office sort of admin, general affairs staff, and they have reassigned them to become IT engineers and salespeople, tough jobs, and jobs which often they have no training or experience or ability to do, and they've actually told them, and if you don't like it, please resign. So basically, and I've been in companies that have done this as well. There were like too many engineers and salespeople, and they were always sort of fighting, the engineers and the salespeople. So they said, okay, all the engineers, you have to do sales. All salespeople, you have to be engineers. And yeah, it forced people to basically quit. You know, the engineers who couldn't sell had to quit. The salespeople who couldn't engineer had to quit. In a way, it made sense, in the sense that it was always better to have a salesperson who understands the engineer's perspective, and always better for engineers who understand how to sell. But basically, you put people in a situation where you force them to have to want to quit. So that's what they're doing. It's because they can't fire people. They've just assigned people to jobs that they're not qualified for, hoping that we'll get the message and leave. It's kind of horrible, but it's a side effect of the way that the Japanese labor system is set up. Those are persimmons, kaki. I never ate them before I came to Japan, and when I came to Japan, I didn't really get them because I'm used to like really sugary, really sweet, really sour, strong flavors like I'm used to in New Zealand or whatever. And when I came to Japan, there were so many foods here that tasted kind of bland by comparison. You know, the palate here is a lot more subtle. And it took probably about 6 or 7 months for my palate to adjust to Japan. And when it did, these are basically winter food. They're out at the moment. They're winter fruit. And they are like one of my favorite fruits. I mean, they're really, really nice, these persimmons. And I must admit, I do look forward to this time of year, and I have persimmons almost every day, all winter. However, those persimmons, normally I'd get like cut persimmons from the supermarket, like in a container, and have them like for dessert or for, you know, light dinner or whatever. And I'll pay about $4 for like probably 2 cut up persimmons, just like those 2 cut up persimmons right there. Those 2 cut up persimmons, however, cost together $5,400 US. I mean, converting at 100, so roughly $5,000 US for those 2 persimmons. And yeah, I don't really know what to do about that. I'm sure that they are good, but you know, would you ever eat 2 apple-sized pieces of fruit that cost $5,000 US? And how would you eat them? I mean, I get through my persimmons pretty quick. I can tell you, I eat them really fast. I'd probably be done with that in 30 seconds. If you were given 2 $5,000 persimmons, would you like chop them up really small and try to avoid chewing on them to make it last longer? I mean, what do you even do with that? So yeah. By the way, I'm just noticing the comments. I'm noticing Fluffy Fuzzbox talking about the new baby metal is awful because the cute one left and they added 5 new dancers and they have dreadlocks now. Well, it could be I kind of like dreadlocks actually. I mean, you know, I would get them myself, but I have certain limitations. But well, anyway, that's okay. This is kind of cool, and I do like to keep track of Twitch because I really like the idea that they're pushing YouTube to stay on its game. They have added 2 really cool features. One, they're adding a karaoke feature where you can request songs and it will actually play karaoke songs that you can do in your live streams, which actually, well, it's kind of cool. Anyway, I kind of like that. The other thing is that if you're like on a team game, like you're playing a tournament or whatever, or you're playing online in a team, you can actually unify all the streams. You can cross the streams like the Ghostbusters and show all 4 streams or however many streams in your team at the same time on a Twitch broadcast, which is actually super cool. The karaoke thing, in partnership with music developer Harmonix, the team behind Rock Band, Twitch will be launching a new karaoke game called Sings that will rely heavily on community engagement. Be certain that users will request streamers sing Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up and Aha's Take On Me, which is really hard to sing. I must admit, as a karaoke freak, my interest has peaked. This would be really interesting, even for a lot of YouTube. I mean, the thing about a lot of YouTubers, I've been to some karaoke with some YouTubers, and there are some seriously good singers, especially in the top level YouTubers. So this would actually be quite good. I think this is kind of genius myself. Sergeant Booker, everyone seems to be down with me getting dreadlocks. I'm not sure I'd get into trouble. I think nowadays I'd probably get in trouble for that sort of thing. What the hell, I'd do it if I could. So yeah, there we go. 6.4 million workers to be, the economy's going to be short by 2030, survey finds, so that's pretty bad. Next year, May 1st, I told you last week, it looks like there's going to be May 1st, the first day of the new emperors. It looks like it's going to be a new public holiday. Almost there. It's been submitted to, I think Cabinet's decided that they're going to submit the law to do it. So it's not confirmed yet, but there we go. The enthronement ceremony is going to take place on October 22 next year, but yeah, it looks like they're going to add in some extra vacation days, so that is going to be good. May 1, May 2, May 3, May 4, May 5, May 6, May 15. So yes. Oh, and they're going to get another one in October. That's awesome. So more vacations next year, so more excuses come to Japan, hang out, because we're going to have more free time. It's going to be awesome. This is the story again about the old man who was too shy to ask foreigners to pay. Tokyo Medical School, yes, it turns out they actually cut half of the women who passed the exam. They just made them fail by adjusting their scores because they didn't want to have to deal with women. I mean, I tell you, there are a lot of people that seem to be the idea going up at the moment. It's a scary time to be a male at the moment. How it's becoming, you know, men are getting the whole incel thing about men being you know, it's an age where society's ganging up and really discriminating against men. We don't have this happen to us, you know, and to the extent that there's things like affirmative action, affirmative, you know, discrimination to reverse historical trends where we've had so many advantages. It's because of stuff like this. I mean, you know, you have to admit, I do always love how in Japan they haven't had all these dialogues. You know, in the English language, these dialogues cross countries and cultures very, very quickly. Japan's had a degree of isolation, which I suppose means that they which means that, you know, sometimes they come out and they use arguments which you hear on, like, Yes Minister, the 1970s British TV show, which sound very clever and intelligent to the people saying them, but, you know, they've kind of been things that you have not been allowed to say in public for like 30 or 40 years, but Japanese people say, and they say here in this on this whole issue that, you know, what are we supposed? How are we supposed to accommodate? You know, women, they're just going to leave anyway. All this sort of thing. Things that they say are things like, "Oh my God, did you just say that out loud?" But, you know, probably would have been okay in Mad Men or something like that. Lauren Sakai asking, "Will there be Hiko Simon Karaoke on TT2 on Twitch?" Good question. Probably not. I think it'd be really fun to do, like, as a competition. I would do, and I couldn't really do it at home. But I think it's something like a party thing. Like if I were to, like for example, 2.5 Voyages in a good setup, like me versus Victor, where you pick our songs and score us, and make it like a, you know, like a sing-off or something like that, like as part of a game. Yeah, I would do that. I would destroy as well. I would be awesome at that. So hell yeah. I'll put that in there. So hey, she's in Taisu. So yeah, I'd totally be down for that. I'm the king of karaoke. I mean, I really am. I learned all my Japanese at karaoke. So yeah, I'm a bit of a freak like that. So there you go. Yeah, seriously, tournament style karaoke. And if this is a thing, I think you'd actually find a lot of, like, people who are on YouTube, like, would actually be pretty good. There is a thing about, so the thing about karaoke is a lot like other things in life, where you generally do it better if you're less inhibited. And obviously, if you're going on the internet filming yourself, it's an indicator of a slight degree of a lack of inhibition anyway, which generally means that, you know, you're comfortable enough in your own skin that you're not so self-conscious, that you would hold yourself back in how you would perform singing. So yeah, and that theory, I think, has been, I've been out karaoke with some YouTubers, and you know, yeah, they're pretty good actually. In fact, a lot of people I know are actually pros. They actually have gone out and recorded as well. So yeah, I would love to do a karaoke challenge. I'd be down for that, seriously. So this is kind of cool, and on YouTube they've got to pick this up, because yeah, hell yeah, I'd go over to Twitch and do that. So yes. In fact, I think you're also not supposed to talk about the other channel as well, so I'm probably going to stop it there. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. I talked about this last week because it bothers me. China is making enormous concentration camps for millions of people. BBC did a special on it this week. You can see them from space. These are re-education camps, but this is like the Great Leap Forward type crap. I mean, this is extremely disturbing, and you know, for all the stuff that we're all outraged at Saudi Arabia at the moment, we're outraged at North Korea, which does this, but North Korea doesn't do this on the scale, and China's doing it with, you know, like basically all the Turkic people in Western China. And this is exactly like, I mean, China rounding up the Muslims for perceived security threat. I mean, you know, this is, even if it is, it's only a very small number of people that represent the threat. This is very much like what, I mean, if you take out the gas chambers and everything, this is what Germany did to Jewish people. They put them all into camps, and we don't know what's going on inside of these camps, and this is happening today. So you know, this is very disturbing, and keep paying attention to it, because I think it's an important story, and it bothers me. And China's come out, and they actually said, even with the synagogue massacre that happened in America overnight, the Chinese government apparently made a public statement about this, saying this kind of like extremist hate is why we need re-education camps and why we're doing this. But these are regular people, these are families getting sent to these places. In fact, it's so ironic that they would use an anti-Semitic incident as a justification for concentration camps. It's a lot like the movie Martial Law. years and years ago. It's the same concept. It's ridiculous. So anyway, it bothers me, and that's why I put that there. Johnny Depp is going to be playing the White Savior. You have to say it. I mean, it's kind of funny. You can't pitch a movie to Hollywood unless there's like I mean, it's kind of funny. They've got is that his makeup for the role? It looks like they're trying to make him look more Japanesey or something. But he's not playing a Japanese person. He's playing an American photographer who covered the Minamata incident, which was actually a big feature of. Yeah, I can tell you stories about this as well. Actually, this has been I've been involved in aspects of my life. This is a big one of the world's first like major environmental incidents that had a really big political impact. It happened just after World War II in Kumamoto Prefecture in the lovely town of Minamata, famous for its pure white sand beaches. Those white sand beaches are basically sand is made out of silicon, pure silicon, and the whiter the beach, the better the silicon. So there were factories there that wanted to make silicon crystals, basically for silicon chips and whatnot. So they set up a factory on these beautiful white beaches in Kumamoto in Minamata town. The manufacturing process for extracting silicon from the sands involves mixing it with mercury and letting the runoff mercury and nasties all sort of go back out. And in those days they didn't really appreciate how dangerous mercury was, so they would just let it go flow back out to the ocean. They process it all by the beach. They'd get the silicon crystals and ship them out. It turned out all the mercury was going out to the fish. All the townspeople in this town where this factory was were eating the fish, and everyone started getting the most horrible diseases. Basically all the kids were getting birth defects, all the people in the towns were getting the mercury would get absorbed through the food into the nervous system. It would attach to the nervous system, and it would make your entire nervous system like freeze up and have seizures and pain constantly forever. One of the most unpleasant, and everyone in the town got this mystery disease and no one knew the cause of it. It took years for them to figure out it was from the factory, and the factory kind of figured it out, but as you'd expect, they didn't proactively come forward. They didn't compensate anybody, and when it was ascertained that it was the factory's fault, the government protected the factory, passing laws to prevent the victims of the pollution from suing the factory or getting any medical compensation for it. And it caused a big outrage, and it's still going on today actually. It's kind of a big deal, yes, I can tell you more about this in time. I think this will actually be a good movie. It's a fascinating story if you're ever interested in environmental law or environmental issues. The Minamata incident is one of the groundbreaking incidents. It's like the Union Carbide incident in India, stuff like that, and it happened here in Japan, and it still has a significant impact on society today. The whole thing about it is, when I was a law student in New Zealand studying this, I said I'm never going to work for the company that did this chiso. And it turned out, without knowing, the first company I ever worked at in Japan was the company that did this, through a whole chain of other stuff. I'll tell the whole story sometime, but it's kind of funny. This story is completely outrageous. It is movie material. I'm fascinated to see it come out. Yes, I can talk a lot about it, but I'm going to go to the next story anyway. It is terrible, but you know, this was arguably was a time when no one knew better, but when they realized what was going on, they treated it, they handled it the worst way possible. Japan weighs accepting more Asian refugees from 2020. So from 2020, Japan is going to apparently looking at doubling the current annual ceiling of 30 refugees that Japan takes. Japan apparently, you know, how many do they have again? It was like tens of thousands of people apply for refugee status in Japan every year. Japan, the country which through Chiune Sugihara liberated tens of thousands of Jewish refugees during World War II. They reject tens of thousands of refugee applications and only accept 30 every year, including people from totally legit like war zones and persecution and whatnot. And they're looking at doubling it. I guess they're trying to improve their image, but doubling is one thing, but you know, and bearing in mind, this is refugees. These are people who need shelter. They can't live like the Yazidi people, for example, from Iraq and from Syria. These are people who can't live safely in their own country, and they need to escape and live in another place. And you know, the UNHCR basically has a system whereby countries will give refuge to people who are recognized as needing it. And Japan's like, yeah, but we only want 30 of them, and we're going to reject tens of, you know, thousands and thousands more of applicants. So, you know, this is different to immigration. These are people in need of refuge. Now, of course, not all the people applying for refugee visas are necessarily legitimate refugees, and there is a filtering process. But the point is, no matter how cynically you look at the idea of people falsely applying for refugee visas, 30 out of like 20,000 is Pretty disingenuous. So yeah, there's that. There was an article in the Japan Times the other day which featured J-vloggers that vlog in Japanese. I used to do that myself, but honestly it's really hard to get the interaction, so I've come back to English because I really like that you guys will interact with me. It's not so lonely, so I do it that way. But yeah, there are a few people, including Mr. Yabatan there, looking very gaijin celebrity-ish there. They also got Mimei, who is awesome. She's from New Zealand, and it's got a bit of a feature on her, which is pretty cool. She's really, really cool, actually, so it's very, very worth checking out. The story of Mimei, how she came from a little town in New Zealand. Mentions Give Me a Break Man there is one of the people, I didn't actually know this, who actually first sort of gave her a bit of a plug. And it's also got Miss Hanake, who I'm also familiar with, although I haven't really, I think I've met her before, but I don't know her very, very well. But she's also doing that. It's got these 3 vloggers that are featured in the Japan Times in a big profile. And yeah, if you're into YouTube and YouTubers, it's worth definitely checking that one out. That's the kidnapped journalist that I was talking about, who got the whole Jigo Sekinin thing beaten up on him. I thought I wouldn't have enough time for the show today, but I do, because I'm over time. Look at that, I'm 10 minutes over. That's the story on the shortage of workers. YouTube listed out its priorities for the year the other day. Japan is ending ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, for China, which is kind of funny because China has been a bigger economy than Japan's for like the last 10 years. But Japan still pays development aid to China for, I mean, a lot of China is still undeveloped, but now they're going to start working on joint ODA projects for other countries, especially given that China spends more on ODA to other countries than it now receives from Japan. So Japanese are sort of asking, isn't Japan just paying, subsidizing China's ODA? So that's changed. And the government's confirmed now that apparently the central Japanese government, which is obliged to maintain a certain percentage of disabled workers, disabled being defined by having a certain medical notebook that says that they're officially recognized and registered as disabled. There are obligations on all companies in Japan and on central government ministries to employ something like 2.5% of their workforce needs to be made up of officially disabled people. However, central government agencies, including the Ministry of Labour itself, that enforces this law and fines and punishes companies that don't meet this threshold, made up their numbers of their disabled employees. I've told you about this before, it's kind of ridiculous. A detailed audit into how bad the issue was found that 28 central government bodies made up a total of 3,700 fake disabled people that don't exist in order to pretend that they're meeting their targets. In order to try to improve things, the Ministry of Finance the other day actually did start advertising for disabled people, but they added the conditions to the advertisement saying, we only want disabled people that are sufficiently able-bodied that they can commute to work for themselves and don't need any assistance. So it's sort of like, it's like saying, we want disabled, we're advertising for disabled people, but we don't want you to be too disabled, and ideally we'd like you to be good looking. That immediately got, and this was one of the departments that also lied on the number of disabled people it had when it failed to meet its targets. And obviously they're still not really quite adapted to the idea of what it is to employ disabled people, that you have to figure out how to accommodate them, and this is the idea as part of a social responsibility. So like a lot of things, Japan's still struggling to come into the 19th century. And this is definitely one of them. But the irony is, these are the ministries themselves that apply and punish regular companies that didn't do this. Yet all this time they were faking their own numbers. I mean, it was just kind of ridiculous. This is maybe the final story I have. Earlier in this week, there was a big incident. Apparently, someone was spotted getting onto a bullet train with a gun. People called police. The train was stopped. Police inspectors came onto the train. It turned out the person on the train was a plainclothes police officer who had been in training in Tokyo and was going back to Osaka. So it was actually a police officer who was had a permit for carrying a handgun, but it's just so unusual to see anyone with a gun under any circumstance that a number of passengers who spotted this person with a legally carried handgun going onto a bullet train caused them to stop the bullet train and for the police to come on and raid the train and check it was all okay. And I tell you what, given things happening in other parts of the world where people carry assault rifles and it's like totally okay, and when there's a shooting or something goes wrong, people say that the solution is that more people should have more assault rifles in order to stop it. as one option, and the other option being that even when a plainclothes police officer has a gun on a train, everybody stops and just makes sure it's okay, because that sort of shit is crazy. I'm glad to be in the country where we do that. Personally, that's just me, and I'm not anti-gun. I mean, I grew up shooting guns and stuff like that, but I do not think that anybody needs, you don't need guns, shit. I mean, if you want to go hunting or whatever, that's all fine. That capsule hotel that's been in lots of movies, it's still kind of crappy and rusty and whatever, but the Nakagin Tower, they're going to adapt it into monthly apartments which you can go rent and stay in, which would be kind of cool and trendy. It's in a cool neighborhood. It's right beside where the Ginza Hub is, where Rob's been helping me with the MyChan project. And Japanese Pod 101, if you are learning Japanese, definitely use, it's free, it's there online, Japanese Pod 101. They've just got 1 million subscribers. That's going super well. You might recall all the way back that actually had Hiroko Nakamura. It's been around for a long time. They're doing awesome, so congratulations, Japanese Pod 101. Oh yeah, and the New Zealand All Blacks, they came to play a rugby game in Japan yesterday. We won, we beat Australia, yes. And the New Zealand media was talking about Japan, how it's basically everything that Japan is not. It has things to do, it has courteous people. The description of it was funny. So basically, there was a quote in here which just got me laughing, that was just talking about how the rugby team has to be careful in Japan because it's got all these things that they don't have in New Zealand, like things to do and courteous people. New Zealanders are actually okay at that, but yes, it was definitely dangerous that they were coming to a country with things to do. That's why I moved here, and that's the end of the show. Thank you for joining. Wow, I'm sorry, that was 1 hour 45 minutes, but I hope you enjoyed it. That is all the stuff that I've got. And boom, am I getting an ad for was there an ad for eHarmony there? I hope not. So yes, you support open carry of swords. Well, even that stuff will get you into trouble in Japan. So yeah, that's the show. I hope you all have a good week. Check out the start of the show where I was talking a little bit about the plans for my channel, what's going on with that at the moment. Please check out the site. If you like the show, please show your support. Please show your love by remembering to click on like, because I do appreciate that. It makes me feel good and motivated for the next show, which will be next week at 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time, Sunday night. I hope you all have a very, very good week there. See you all next week, and yeah, peace. Should I do an outro? Should I do a chord track, or should I just go? Maybe I'll just do a chord track. I can always cut it off. I'm feeling in the mood. I've been downloading a bunch of drum tracks, so I do have some stuff I want to check out. But I'll let you guys otherwise head out, because it's been a long show, and thank you for joining me. So boom, boom, oh, boom, boom. Let's get this one. Okay, so let's switch mode to chord mode. Boom. And let's go new track. Give me a style of music. In fact, let's pick one of the new beats I got. Let's go 1, 2, 4. Let's start with 8. Boom. Let's do a hi-hat in there. Oh. Crap, what happened? Up. Let's go analog. That's the show. Have a good week, everybody. Boom. Peace. See ya. Peace.